But when it comes to like your hip and ankle mobility, is there a place for room for improvement? And if you are to encourage improvement in ankle mobility or hip mobility to the point where you notice that's actually limiting them to perform the squat as a, just properly, what are some ways that you practice that hip mobility or ankle mobility that athletes can do and coaches can implement for their athletes? Or do you just reckon that you work with what you got and work on improving that?
Yeah, so there's structural mobility. So if you have your hip joint, it's a ball and socket joint.
Yeah.
If this ball is the femur, so that's your thigh bone. The head of that thigh bone is the head of the femur that sits in the socket.
Yeah.
Now, some people have very shallow sockets, so they have great range of motion, and these individuals are generally great at hitting great depths with their squats. But then you have other individuals that have much deeper sockets, which is a lot more stable because a larger percentage of that ball articulates with this socket. It's a lot more stable, but it's a lot less mobile.
Yeah.
And these are the individuals that struggle to achieve certain depths. Now, if it's a structural mobility issue, we can't push them. We can't improve their mobility. We can't push them to a position where it's bone on bone and they're just getting jammed in that position. So it's important to identify if that's happening. And if we try and work beyond that, we can be definitely causing a lot of damage.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are things that we can do to see. I'm not. That's not part of my game, is to assess people's hip structures and their mobility restrictions and all of these things. To an extent, to a large extent, I can help with the techniques that I provide. So the stance that I use when I talk about squat stance, I always say it's unique to the individual. How do we know what's the right stance? It's called trial and error, and we determine this as we are warming up with unloaded, completely unloaded. And these are the assessments that I'll have. So I'll tell all of my individuals, and I'll help them if I'm standing there, determine, changing their stance to, toes out, toes in, toes straight, feet wide, feet close, and all of these different variations to determine the optimal stance for that individual. And what I consider to be optimal is one where they are able to achieve good squat depth and maintain neutral pelvis position and a neutral spine position before we start to load that individual. Now, something about mobility, the difference between mobility and flexibility. I'd say the main difference between the two is flexibility is able to take your limbs to an end range, but you can't passively. Mobility is the ability to do this actively. So to have strength at these end ranges is mobility. So a lot of the times people are hugely flexible, but they can't hit these end ranges because they don't have the strength in that end range. So sometimes it's a matter of the rules that I have with squats is to go as deep as your mobility allows.
Yes. Okay.
Right? So that might mean that you can't go ass to grass or full depth or powerlifter style depth in your squat, but I'll still work towards the individual's end range of motion, because a lot of times they say that there's a carryover. I think it's 15 or 30 degrees on either side. So if we call this, parallel depth, and the individual can only squat to here before they start rounding, I'll take them to here. And as they develop strength, they've got an additional 15% of range of motion carryover that they're strengthening. Even though they're only strengthening to this range of motion, they're still strengthening 15 degrees beyond that. So simply performing the movement with the correct technique. For those of you who don't know what the correct technique is, obviously I teach it in all of my SSIC courses.
Yes.
We go into great depth with technique because it's hugely important for your success. But if you wanted a quick crash course on squatting technique, I've got a video tutorial link in my bio that is absolutely for free.
Yeah.
The way that I teach this squat allows people to position themselves in a way to maximize their own mobility. And that's the recommendation. Squat as deep as your mobility allows. In time, people's mobility improves with strength in that position.
Yeah.
And that's my recommendation.